Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Land Conservation Committee to order. Roll call.
George Bousset,
Here.
Gary Eater. Gary Eater online. All right. Pat Kinney,
Here.
Jim Schultz,
Here.
David Mindell,
Here.
Charlie Ortman,
Here.
Jerry Richardson.
Introductions this morning.
I don't think so.
I
I
think
think
we're
we
all-
all know each other.
Yeah.
We don't have any new staff yet.
Very good. Item number 3, public comments. Anybody online? Any public comments? No hearing, no public comments. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion? George?
Well, I don't know if you made the motion before you have the discussion, but I do have a correction.
All right,
In item 6F, climate change discussion, the last sentence, the quote should be environmental impacts of long-term weather trends. And it currently reads long-term changes in the climate. So it's not that, it's long-term weather trends. I went back and listened to the tape. Thank you.
Move to approve the minutes with the correction.
Charlie moves to approve the minutes. Do I hear a second? Second by George. Whoop, yep, Dave Manell, yep. Stand corrected. Okay,
Had a vote on the motion.
all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, George. Number 5, discussion and action items. Approval of the agricultural technician hire.
Okay, we had interviews yesterday. We interviewed 2 people that applied. We did have a total of 6 applicants. 4 of the people had no agriculture experience at all and were recent college grads. So we reviewed the applicants and we interviewed the top 2 people. One of them is Tim Micka, Ashland County farmer, 40 years farming experience, did an excellent interview. Pat Kinney sat in observing. Ben Dufford from Bayfield County Conservationist was on the committee. Elijah Hoffman, the new conservationist from Douglas County. Seth and myself conducted the interviews. Tim Micka was our first choice unanimously. I would like to offer him the position. If everyone is okay with us offering a position at this point. The second candidate that we interviewed, his name was Mason Pomeroy. He's a recent grad from UW-Stevens Point. He works for Ozaukee County Land Conservation Department this summer as an intern. He also did a wonderful interview, but he has no agriculture background beyond the experience that he's gaining this summer. He could also be a good employee. It would just be highly, highly intensive training to bring him on board. So I would entertain any questions, comments, suggestion to go ahead and hire.
Charlie?
Tim was also our rotational grazing specialist for a few years, wasn't he?
Correct. He worked for the county back in 2014.
And he's got relationships established with most, if not all, of the farmers around here.
He's been farming for 40 years.
Yeah. I'm going to suggest that he be hired, that we agree to hire him, but I am so biased it isn't funny. So I almost feel like maybe I can't look at it objectively. I don't know. I just want to state that right up front, but my most concern is, and in this case, I don't think there's anything we do about it, but how do we get these other folks who obviously you don't have any experience when you've just graduated college? How do you get your foot in the door to get experience then to get a job in this arena?
You take a chance. You hire young people. Excellent intern, been on our team for 5 years? 5 years already.
Right?
Excellent intern. Write a grant, hire her for 2.5, 3 years, as long as we can keep her on board permanently if we can. You take a risk.
And I
You-
know
you
your road here was,
Offer time to train. You
Yep.
onboard.
your road here was peppered with experience growing jobs till Tom retired.
Mhm.
And we wanted you in just a second too. So with that, I will say, I support hiring Tim. Thank you.
George,
If we're going to vote on a motion, I would prefer to vote in the affirmative to rely on the judgment of the interview committee rather than voting on a specific individual to be approved by this committee, because I would have to abstain again because we all know the father, and the father's talked a lot about the son, and there's just inability to be objective in that case. But I would be happy to vote in affirmative to rely on the judgment of the interview committee.
Dan,
I just kind of want to go off of what George said. This committee doesn't actually make the hiring decision. That's an administrative decision. So it's one that Mary Jo and I would make. So the reason why I asked for this to even be on the committee, because there is at least appearance of a conflict of interest. He's Scott's brother-in-law, and we do have policies in our handbook about that. So I want this committee to be aware of that and be okay with that potential conflict before making any hire. I felt it was important that everybody knew going in of the issue.
Charlie,
So George's recommendation would be good for us to follow, I think, then. Would you?
I don't think you even really need to do George's recommendation. You can if you want. This is really more so everybody knows that there is a family connection to the person with a current employee.
So this is an FYI for us rather than a
Right.
request for permission.
Right. It'd be same at the city
Okay.
level. Brant would make the hire in consultation with the mayor.
Okay.
So Dan, do we actually need any approval on my recommendation?
No, you don't. But if anybody, again, if you could just detail the conflict, if anybody had an issue with it, that's where your role would be because of that.
okay, very good. Sounds like we're all in general approval. And
Yep.
it'll be up to the county positions there. George?
It seems to me, in order to put this into the record, that perhaps a motion without naming any names express confidence in the administration and the interview committee for the hiring of a new tech. I don't know if anybody else thinks that's a good idea.
Jerry?
The fact that his qualifications are so well and so fitting, it's kind of a no-brainer in a sense. And he's already been good in the system already with us, so I'm definitely in favor of him.
Pat?
I sat in on the interviews and I fully concur with what Mary Jo said. I support hiring Tim as the first choice, given his background and experience. The second person, if you were hiring a person fresh out of college, he's doing an internship now, he'd be a very good person to work with. He's passionate about natural resources, and he also has a lot of intellectual curiosity, which drives him to learning more. If Tim, for some reason, were to turn it down, I would support hiring the second person. Mary Jo in her department does a good job of bringing in new people and getting them started, which brings me to the previous person in that role, Matt. He started as an intern, was splitting time with wildlife abatement and ag tech. And a few years ago, for those of us that were here and remember this, we split off the wildlife abatement and Matt went full-time ag tech. He was interested in doing that. He was passionate about it. And Matt more than rose to the occasion of fulfilling that role as an ag tech. And I actually think, Mary Jo, we should consider a resolution recognizing Matt's work in the full-time ag tech position, because when you asked this committee and the board to do that, I sit on finance and I think about, are these good decisions or not financially? And Matt certainly fulfilled our aspirations in terms of what he could do with that job. So not only did he step into, the ag tech as a new person initially, but then he stepped into it as a full-time person, and he really grew that position into more than it was when he started here as an intern. I think a resolution recognizing what he's done in that role and growing it into what he did, so that when it came time to fill that position again, there was no question we were going to fill that position because he did an excellent job with it. And you deserve recognition too for mentoring people and working with them to grow them into the employees that they are, so that when something else comes along and they can further their career, they're able to take that next step. And Matt was able to do that. So I think there's recognition that should be given that. And I think about, it's over a decade ago, they had a pasture field day out at the Mecca farm. You go down there and see the place and on a hay wagon, make the tours and stuff. So I did that. It's more than a decade ago already. Tim is going to add to what Matt did in a variety of ways. He's going to build on what Matt did. And part of that is going to be with the grazing efforts, rotational grazing. And that part really fits well with what we're looking at from a natural resource protection, to have more pasture up here, more rotational grazing, more beef in terms instead of row crops. I don't know if the rest of you saw this, but over the last week, there's a report out that by the end of this century, corn, wheat, soybean production in this country is likely to decline by 30 to 50% because of the changing climate. Even in this neck of the woods, the corn production is predicted to go down. So transitioning to crops that are more suitable for our climate and our environment and fit what we value, Tim is going to add to that with what he brings, but he's also going to build on what Matt did. So yes, I fully support, Tim is the new person, but I think Matt deserves recognition for what he did. And it's good to acknowledge what Tim is going to bring to the table and how that fits our bigger plan. We're working on the comm plan now. I've got the ag and forestry sections, but in the ag section with farmland preservation, what Tim will bring to build on what Matt did is going to be important to us too.
I guess I just want to mention something, that we have a lot of exceptional employees in the county that never get recognized. And we have standard employees. And I would be a little cautious about how we decide to start recognizing people, because we're sort of setting a precedent or an expectation then that every time something good happens, to write a resolution and bring it to the county board is a level of work. It's another meeting. So I don't know how I feel about that. There were also some things in the evaluation that were not exceptional or maybe didn't warrant that type of level of recognition to me. So I'm not sure how we handle situations like that.
George?
Perhaps simply a letter of recommendation from the county conservationist for the individual to carry forward would be appropriate without raising the problem of sorting out publicly who is to be esteemed and who is not.
I'd be in agreement with that. Anybody else? And who would take care of that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. It was a letter,
Letter of recommendation?
a letter of
Or letter
recommendation.
Appreciation?
Yeah.
Letter of recommendation from the county conservationist recommending the prior employee when appropriate. That would be you.
A letter of recommendation for Matt Boland.
Or any individual whom you deem appropriate when they're leaving the department. Sure.
Maybe the word we want is commendation or appreciation. Recommendation kind of applies to me that you're suggesting or promoting them for acceptance at a new position, rather than thank you for the good work you did here. But I'm not sure what we need.
So when our department is asked for a letter of recommendation, we always apply that as standard business practice.
I'm just recommending that the letter of recommendation be given at the time of departure, not waiting for a request to be recommended. So for the individual's portfolio.
Okay, any other suggestions, comments? Then we will move on to staff positions and federal funding discussion. Who's going to start it off?
Okay, I provided a list of all of our current staff positions. And we've had some discussion in our office just about current positions and uncertainty with federal budgets and how that could affect our positions in the future. So you should have a list. I passed them out to everyone. The county conservationist, that would be my position. That position is fully funded through the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. Doesn't utilize any other sources of funding or county funding. We have the administrative assistant. Carisha fills that role. And then I put a description of what each position, just a basic description of the duties. That position is a shared position with zoning. That's funded through county levy dollars. We have the civil engineer technician. That role is filled by Seth. That's a combination of DATCAP, Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, and county funding. We have the land and water specialist position. That role is filled by Scott Caven. That's a combination of Wisconsin DNR grants and county dollars. That's fully funded. We will be hiring the agriculture technician in the wildlife damage program. So the wildlife damage program is contracted out, but we still do administer it through the county. We pay the invoices for that and we receive reimbursement from the DNR. So the agriculture technician is fully funded through a National Association of Conservation Districts grant. We receive 100% reimbursement on that grant. It is an annual grant, so that's something that we have to write every year. It is highly competitive the first time you write for the grant. It becomes less competitive in future years. This is the 4th consecutive year that we've had the grant now. I feel pretty confident in the grant for the most part. Now with the current administration though, this program has not been targeted. I'm not sure what it means for the future though. So if we are going to want to continue the agriculture work that we're building in the county, we're going to have to think about how are we going to fund that in the future if this funding source goes away. I am also looking at working with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, trying to secure a 2 or 3 year contract for that position. I am on a waiting list right now with the state to receive one of those. It's called a NRCS Cooperative Agreement. It's a non-competitive funding source, but they also get their money from federal sources. So I'm not sure how that's going to be affected in the future. Something to keep in mind though. And then we have our watershed project coordinator. That role is currently filled by Ellie. That is funded by a Great Lakes Restoration Grant. This is the work that we're doing on all of our natural flood management work. That role was previously filled by Seth in 2021 and 2022. That also funds the construction of our in-stream ravine flood conservation projects. So that grant is a $300,000 grant. We have some funding that we're working on from prior years, and our new contract will take effect beginning in October for 3 years. That funding source could be volatile in the future as well. You guys want to discuss? And it's open for discussion.
George.
Sorry, please remind my aging brain about the split between DNR and the Ag and Wildlife Damage Program in terms of management of the wildlife damage program under that job.
The wildlife management program, so all of the wildlife damage or abatement measures are covered by APHIS now. So we contract with Ethan Rossing, covers Ashland County. So he does the on-field administration work. They bill us for services and any sort of abatement measures, fencing materials. We pay the bills and then we seek reimbursement from the state.
So is wildlife damage actually part of this position's
It will be.
role?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Matt was administering that even after we let go of the program. He was no longer doing the field work for it, but he was administering the billing, the invoicing, the reimbursements.
Got it. Thank you.
Jerry.
Well, then too, Mary Jo, you mentioned when you were talking about the agricultural technician, wildlife damage, you mentioned NRCS, if I understood you right. What were you referring to? Was there partnering in it or what? Because I didn't understand ever that they ever had any part in the wildlife technician part.
Right now, the ag technician is funded by a federal grant, National Association of Conservation Districts. That is an annual grant. And I'm trying to get away from us writing annual grants to pay for staff because you don't know from one year to the next how volatile that money is going to be, especially given our administration right now is taking away a lot of conservation funded types of programs. So NRCS has what's called a cooperative agreement, where they will fund agricultural based projects or staff in counties. And it's a 2 or 3 year contract, non-competitive, directly through NRCS at the state office. And I'm trying to secure one of those contracts to pay for this position in the future instead of having to write the federal grant every year. Now, NRCS also is federal money, so they still have those contract agreements available right now, but I'm not sure what it's going to look like for them in the future years. So I'm hoping to secure a contract by the end of this year that would tie money in for us to pay for this position for 2 or 3 years out. Then I no longer have to write a grant, and hopefully the contract would be more secure. But then 2 or 3 years from now, we got to figure out again, how are we going to pay for that position? Unless the county absorbs it. And ideally, I would like all of these positions to be paid for by the county, but that's a large investment from the county.
And you also then don't take advantage of the grant money that would be,
Right,
might be available.
right. The grant money is a lot of work. It's
Yeah,
a lot of work. And if, someday if I'm not here, is the next person going to be willing to write all these grants to pay for people? So how do you build a program and secure it for the future, regardless of who's driving the ship?
Any other questions, comments? Well, it sounds like you're doing a mighty fine job, Mary Jo. Keep up the good work. Thanks, everybody. Okay, that's it for the staff positions and funding. Next one is update on comprehensive plan.
I guess I can give sort of a status of where the planning committee is right now. There's the process of getting a consultant to Northwest Regional Planning Corporation on board, but that process is not yet quite complete. But they will be working with us, and Northwest Regional Planning will do primarily the data updates that are in the plan of all the existing database. The committee itself, the individual members of the committee have divided into tackling different segments of the plan. So Pat Kinney is working on agriculture now. I already know you've been working with Pat. So right now we're at a level of needing to begin working as working groups to gather information from experts and residents of the county. And an important stage right now is that we raise the public's awareness of this project ongoing, so the public knows that they can come and contribute their thoughts. So public relations, publicity will become really important, and in any way that this committee can help, that would be useful. One question that crossed my mind is that there is the annual poster contest, the conservation poster speaking contest. I was wondering whether the theme of that was determined on a statewide basis, or whether we could establish a theme that would be something like, my land, my future, my land, something like that. So when the students were creating posters, they would automatically be creating a publicity mechanism for us. Scott, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So the annual conservation poster contest, the theme of that is set at the federal level. So it's actually at the federal level. So the National Association of Conservation Districts would set whatever the theme is for that given year. It's then adopted by the respective states. So Wisconsin Land and Water, in this case, would adopt that theme, and then of course it's kind of passed down to the county level. So yeah, as long as we're participating in that, our hands are a little bit tied, unless we did something totally independent of that.
Do we know what the theme will be for this year?
It has not been released yet. Typically, it's kind of late summer is when they release the theme. So yeah, it hasn't been released yet.
Do we have a voice in inputting to what we'd like the theme to be or not?
you might.
Not to my knowledge. It's something we can look into. I know it's set at the federal level. If it's of interest, we could look into it, but I think it's set.
When you think of the kids who live there, it is their land, it is their future, and it's all at stake. And so it'd be great if we could do something along that lines at some point.
Charlie?
NACD is having a conference in Milwaukee on July 28th, I think. And Monty Osterman is part of the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association, and he is really connected to NACD. So if you were to call him with that idea, he might be able to reach out to people at NACD and influence that, thumb that scale a bit. And MONTE,
I can reach out to him.
okay.
I'll be presenting at that national conference, so.
But if maybe we need to reach him right now, just I don't know if there is any way to influence it, it might be, the window might be shortening up.
I can send an email right this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Our land, our future.
Jerry,
George, I'm not trying to be opposition or anything like that, but I always felt the themes, I was so impressed with the themes that they came up with. They were always conscientious about conservation and everything that we stand for. And I don't think we need to spend any time on this committee putting time into that. No, that's my thought on it, because I think they've done so well on it, and we've got good response from everybody, and why rock the boat?
George,
Yeah, I remember we're just in the part of the agenda talking about the update on the comprehensive plan. So my only point was that we're looking for ways to raise the public visibility that we're working on the plan. And this was maybe one way to do it, maybe not.
Charlie,
And although I would agree to a large extent with Jerry, I can tell you these folks, they want input. They love it when their constituents call, or the organizations that they support. They love hearing from you. And sometimes they see it as a validation of their work. Sometimes they see it as, oh, we need to be looking in another direction. And we used to be able to, well, we do that with the WLW, with the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association, but your reps don't always think of everything. And your reps, I am one of which, listening to you, that's how we liaise that stuff back. So never don't talk to somebody because you think you're wasting their time, is what I would say. That's all I'd say. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent idea. So George, I will email you Monty's contact. And I think hearing it from committee members has a stronger weight than employees advocating for this. So I will I'll send you his contact and you can reach out. Thank you.
all right, very good. Any more?
Oh, if I might, sorry.
Charlie,
I don't know if this is a kind of a peripheral comprehensive planning, but I was searching this morning about what states have banned PFAS. I didn't think I'd find any, but there's like 12, and Minnesota has passed a very comprehensive, with some limitations on PFAS. They consider there's no other replacement for it. It's like a health thing, and we need it. But they've passed a pretty comprehensive ban on PFAS, and it's went into effect January 25th of this year. And so I reached out to Angela Stroud and asked her what she thought of looking at that and running it up the flagpole here in our legislature. And I courtesy copied you, Mary Jo, and also Matt Kruger, who is the executive director of our association. So we'll see what she can do with that, what she thinks of it. But we could, as a county, through our comprehensive plan and what I'm going to try to get added, a legislative request under a new section of some sort that would be called state of our plans or whatever, which would, in essence, in my mind, take out the red triangles where we have these goals, but we can't do anything about it. Either we don't have the wherewithal in one way or another, and our visions, which we'll be able to say we can look at our vision and say, well, we're 3/4 of the way here, and we can list the obstacles to our visions and our things that we can't do because we don't have the wherewithal, and then tell the legislature this is what legislation is either stopping us, and this is legislation we would need to enable us. So we have completed the loop, and we have a final thing going back to Madison, who directed the creation of these plans, which was a great idea, but also then lets them know, excuse me, exactly why we can't. And then asks them, rightfully so, and please help us, enable us to accomplish these plans that you've so righteously made us create and have spent so much time and people and money doing to do these visions. And with that, we would ask, I imagine, for a PFAS ban, for a glyphosate review, and perhaps a ban of microplastics, all these things that are obstacling up our view for clean water and clean air. Everybody wants their environments. And so hopefully Angie would get this up on the flagpole already. And then at the end of our comprehensive plan, we might have a legislative request that it was just that amongst others. But that's my long range hope. But that, and really that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Environmental impacts of long-term changes to the climate. Comment, discussion, George.
Just a potential idea would be that, the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Sciences, NIACS, produces an excellent guide about trees and climate transition. So it just struck me that we might allocate part of the proceeds of the tree sale to have the copies of that as a handout when people come to pick up their trees. I don't know if that's going to be the best idea, but it just occurred to me that circulating that kind of guidance into the public through the tree sale about trees and the future of the climate might be a useful idea. Maybe not, maybe yes.
What is the document?
So the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Sciences, I think that's at Northern Tech, right, in Houghton. They produce a really excellent little phone-sized guide on what species are going to do well in the future climate conditions and which ones will do poorly. So when you're planting trees, and Mary Jo and Scott, they do a great job of selecting the species that are included in the tree sale, but it would be a way of getting more information out there to just say, okay, you came and got your trees, here's a bonus, take a guide, pass it along. I didn't bring a copy, but it's just a list about this. Like I say, it's about the size of this and maybe a little bit thicker, and lists all these different trees and what's going to happen to them in the future in our climate zone.
They also have a one-page handout. We do provide that when people specifically ask for it. We also list on our tree sale order form species that are going to be more suitable for future climate predictions in this region. But we could even make the one-page document available just to all purchasers. The guidebook is pretty intensive to specific habitats, so it's designed more for resource managers. I'm not sure if that would be the best resource to be passing out to landowners, but we could certainly have some available for more serious landowners. And at the easiest extent, we could have the one-page document that's very conclusive about species that are going to be at risk or more suitable in our region.
Good idea.
Yeah, I'd be in agreement with that. Pat?
Well, we could put the website for NIACS in the county website where the tree sale information is, and just a paragraph explaining what it is. There's a lot more information on that site than even in that book. And then they've updated that book since that initial book came out. So there's more information than what's in that book, but then there's a lot of other resources on that website. So, I've looked at that site for, a long time. And one of the things that really struck me last year was my higher ground is sandy loam. And I can go, and my land drops 100 feet from the higher to the lower parts. The soils change. And so it's one thing to look at climate, but you've also got to look at soils. So there's a lot more resources there. So as you plan, if you get them to the website, they can find more stuff. And then there's a forest adaptation workbook there. If they really wanted to plan things out, they can use that and that's free. So getting to that website then gets them to lots of other resources. And they do a forest adaptation class each year starting in January. But having said all that, the latest, they're in the Department of Ag, and having said that, they don't know what their funding looks like going forward after this spring either. Hopefully, it remains, but there's a lot of information there.
Charlie,
Mary Jo, we had a presenter from that come and brief the committee once a while back, did we not?
Yes, when we wrote our land and water plan, NIAX came and conducted workshops for our committee.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we've worked with them pretty extensively. And we do have that field guide that George is referencing. It is on our website under our climate change. We also have a link to NIAX there. We have a number like a climate resilience toolkit, climate impacts in northern Wisconsin. And those are some of the things that Pat was just referencing. So those links are already on our website under our climate change section.
Just for what everybody thinks, maybe a presentation from NIAC to the public at the high school auditorium or something. Do you think there would be a market for that, or would that be a sparsely attended event?
I mean, it's tough to say.
Yeah, I went to something at the high school, a presentation on sulfide, or I think it was, we were in the mining, when the mining thing was a big deal, and that auditorium was packed.
Yeah, I think if it's a hot button topic,
Okay.
I've been working with the town of Marengo on our comprehensive plan. We just had a public hearing last week. It was highly advertised. We were talking about all the changes. No one showed up.
Nobody.
No one from the public. We've done groundwater testing, and we've had Stevens Point Lab come here and do public education sessions the last couple years. We've had very little interest from the public. It's very hard to say what you're going to get people to attend. If it's something on the mine or Line 5 or something that's very controversial, it's probably going to get a good draw.
Okay.
It also depends on what are you competing with on that particular day and time. So, I think if we run it as a workshop where we invite people, we know we have a certain number of people that are going to come, which is how we did it for our land and water plan, because we were working with a committee, a working group. That's one thing. But to invite them to come down from Michigan Tech and just have a public presentation where we're at the mercy of the public,
We'll make that a hard no.
it's hard to tell how many people would show up. I mean, it's important to me, but I just don't know.
George?
Building on Charlie's idea, and also to note that the record of this meeting is part of the input to the planning committee or the comprehensive plan. So building on that idea, though, UW Ag and Extension could probably put together a program about the future impacts of long-term weather trends on, plants, insects, and diseases. They're partners at the visitor center. They have experts that could bring. So maybe that would be either a partner with this committee or separately a good program for them to sponsor, and perhaps with some other community organizations that are interested, because it has a little bit of a political tinge to it. And so it might be better to put it in a very apolitical environment, but I'm sure if they also have the capacity to publicize very well. So that might be something we would also consider under UW Ag and Extension, if you thought that was also a good idea or not. What do you think?
My suggestion would be when we update our comprehensive plan, the town of Marengo started out talking about future trends, population trends, housing trends, climate trends. And we talked specifically about data that also shows changes that have already occurred and predicted changes. So if we do something similar with the comprehensive plan to educate people on what is the current data from NIAX and what is predicted for the future, and we have that as part of one of our comprehensive plan meetings when we're reviewing that section of the plan, we could have NIAX come and talk about that during that meeting. That would also already be a public meeting, and it could be further advertised. Because that way you're already capitalizing on a meeting that you have to have, and it would provide input for that committee on things that we already have identified are important to include in the future plan. Climate impacts, weather changes, things that we need to be aware of and adapt to, and we could incorporate it into that whole process.
George?
Just gotta say, I'm already worried about chiggers, Chiggers. They're
They move it.
nasty biting insect that occurs in Indiana and those regions.
We're next, huh?
Pat?
That forced adaptation class, most of the people, it was low 30s that signed up for it were employees of governmental units. And there was me and what I refer to as the old guy from Illinois. He was retired Foreign Service in his early 80s. He was interested in black walnuts. So the Zoom meetings, more often than not, it was him and me with our pictures there and asking questions. And it was the government employees, you could see their name there, but I never saw most of their faces and never heard their voice. But what strikes me is, through NIAX, you can do continuing ed credits, So I know government employees often need to do that. I also know from having taught that, K through 12 instructors also need, continuing ed hours. So maybe one way of attracting an audience is, and I know there's a process to get continuing ed hours for K through 12 systems, and I'm sure there is for governmental units, but maybe we put some effort into finding types of workshops that would meet the criteria for continuing ed credits. Then you have this audience who says, yeah, I need to put in some continuing ed hours, how am I going to fulfill that? And maybe it's not the most exciting thing to all of them, but if we attract some K through 12, it's a way of educating teachers and thus having a broader impact. So maybe some of these workshops, let's say it's forestry, we could make some rounds of some different woods and forests and landscapes and plantings and, actually, in the spring, actually do some planting of different trees in different places and, go through some of that and, and lots of other things with water and you name it. If we had a series of workshops that met those criteria, both K through 12 teachers and government employees, we may have a broader impact, but also it would pull people to the Ashland area, which economically, if some people came and spent some money here and stayed overnight, all those things, that could be positive also. And there is this campus up the road, which maybe, in a few years down the road when we see what happens, maybe there's some capacity there to make some use of some of the building, one building and do some continuing ed stuff. It's a huge market. And I always thought Northland, they never wanted to have a master's in education. That's as steady as money as there is. Teachers are going to keep getting master's degrees. They need continuing ed. It's steady money, it's steady business. And there's individuals, I could do it if I wanted to. I could do workshops with my background and credentials. I could do continuing ed, make darn good money. Some people leave teaching and just do that because it's better money. So, it take a bit to set up, but if you want to have a broader impact and teach and attract people, it's a good business, actually.
Is that a motion, Pat, that you're going to coordinate these workshops? We actually do offer these workshops already. So we have a Lake Superior Collaborative, which is a organization run out of the visitor center, and it is a collaboration of all the natural resource partners in the region. And every year we offer a symposium. And NIAX was the adaptation workbook was one of our workshops last fall in October. This is the second time in 3 years that they've presented one of those workshops here in Ashland. So we are doing something similar to that. It's not as labor intensive as the forest adaptation, which I think is like 6 weeks. It's a number of
Yeah, I think
weeks.
it was 8.
Okay, 8 weeks of programming. So we do offer some of these types of workshops. It's not exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, we can try.
George,
Yeah, just to build on Mary Jo's point there a little bit is that it strikes me that one way to get good participation is to have a number of co-sponsors because each co-sponsoring organization draws a little bit on their own audience. So it's kind of like an upside down pyramid. Instead of going right from the point of discussion to trying to get a broad audience, you go through an intermediary set of co-sponsors to build your audience. That's just one approach. I think it's similar to what Mary Jo was illustrating.
Pat?
So I made a note, I'll look into this a little bit. You know, we've got former Northland faculty and staff that are looking to carry on that mission. It may fit in with that. And years ago, I did look into doing this and actually did some workshops and stuff. But the hard part was fitting that into a schedule where you're teaching full-time because you got to be free to go somewhere else and do this sort of stuff too. But it is a good business and, you know, when people set that up, but it does take some planning and coordination. But there's certainly an opportunity up here with the campus and what we have for natural resources.
George?
What if we go back to Pat's comment earlier about what's happening to the future of corn and other species? Could we amplify that a little bit, that discussion?
Go ahead.
Well, with the corn, you know, there's 2 basic models we're looking at climate change, and one is the low emissions of CO2, and the other is the high. And we're clearly, in the last decade, 15 years, we're clearly on the high emission path, and it looks like we're going to continue that for the foreseeable future as a planet. And so with that model, we're going to have, it's hard to believe, but more rain in the spring and the falls. It doesn't seem that way because when we get rains, it seems to be heavier events. Part of this is lower humidity in the summer, which, you know, seems strange, but it is lower humidity. So the ground dries out faster, plants dry out faster. So the corn production up here is actually going to decrease as far as raising corn for grain. But then other crops, the oats and the wheat and stuff, it's just too much weather that's too hot. But even corn, you know, most field corn, it gets above mid-80s, it starts to shut down to protect itself. So too much heat isn't good. The plants can't take it. They start shutting down. So anyway, in Missouri, believe it or not, they think by the end of the century, they probably won't be raising corn at all. It just won't be a climate where it can take that. There's probably going to be, you know, some things that'll maybe do a little better. Some of the small grains, if you get them in early enough, but if you're on clay, it's hard to get, you know, oats in early. My higher ground that's sandy loam, it's ideal for, you know, it's well drained and warms up so they can plant, you know, when you should plant oats, you know, that soil temperature's in the low 40s. But it's going to be harder to get crops, you know, that production up here that we're used to. That's where this grazing, I think, you know, fits well with what we're looking at and environmentally. So it's, yeah, it's really, I mean, as much as I've been reading about this stuff and been out on that land where I grew up, you know, all my life and garden and stuff, and I've been seeing this stuff for, you know, I can remember this stuff for a good 60 years now. It still is incomprehensible to me what I'm seeing in changes. And there is some pretty strong evidence now climate change is accelerating in the last 10 to 15 years. And so this need to adapt is growing. And, you know, to Tim Micka's credit yesterday in his interview, he referenced, you know, this topic too. And so his understanding of what he's seeing is important too.
George?
A little bit less relevant to Ashland County than like to Bayfield County, but I wonder if Mary Jo or any others have understanding of what will be happening for fruit and berry crops. Do you have any? No? Thank you.
Hmm.
Charlie?
Ben Dufford, call him. He's a Bayfield County con.
Okay. Dan?
I'm just saying, I saw a story in it was either the Washington Post or New York Times within the last week or so about what Pat's talking about. I'm looking for it right now and I'll forward the story to the committee.
Pat?
George, a little bit on that topic is, so the farm's 16 miles as a crow flies from here. And this is another one of those springs, and we keep having them, where it starts warming up far earlier than it historically had used to. And so, you know, the strawberries, the raspberries, the black raspberries, all of this, they start thinking it's spring sooner than they used to. So they start thinking it's spring and start blooming and stuff. But then we get these late frosts. And so because these plants are starting earlier because the weather is warmer earlier, even though our late frosts, you know, your growing season is last frost in the spring to first frost in the fall, you know, it's basic definition. And so on the one hand, we have this quote longer growing season because those dates between last frost and first frost are getting further apart. But when you have plants that start, you know, their life cycle in the spring earlier, even though the last frost is, like, we had some killing frost in late May out there. And so, but I've got stuff that's a month ahead of schedule from when I was a kid. And even though the last frost is later than it used to be, the last frost is only about, when I was a kid, it was about June 10th or 12th, the last frost on average. You know, so even though we had these killing frosts in late May, it's okay, my growing season's 2 weeks longer in the spring, but my plants are like a month ahead of schedule. And so the risk of commercial production off the lake is, and that's why it's in Bayfield, is because of the lake, you have less risk of killing frost after things are blooming. So my apples and stuff get hit again, you know. It used to be rare, but now seems like it's every second or third year I've got killing frost, and I've just got less of what I used to harvest.
One of my best friends owns Apple Hill Orchard, and they're the ones that have the sweet cherries. And we had a exceptionally warm few days in March, and that caused all their trees to bud. And then we had a frost and more snow, and they've lost about 95% of their cherry crop for this year. So half of their year of revenue is not gonna, they've lost it already for July. So I don't think they're gonna be open to the public for picking this year. But this is the second time in the last few years that it's happened. And I'm not saying it's directly related to climate change, because we don't have enough data to know yet. But the occurrence of these changing weather patterns where we're getting really warm days during times of the year that we used to not have that, or whether we're getting precipitation, our precipitation patterns have changed. Lots of our cycles are changing. And we believe it's related to climate change, but we're seeing it happen on the landscape over and over again.
George?
To ask whether there are protective measures is there research into protective measures that would deal with these up and down climate cycles that we're starting to experience regardless of their causes? Or does it just mean that certain crops might no longer be viable? I mean, can we intervene and protect those crops, or should they just be replaced with something different?
That's an excellent question. You know, we don't know. That takes years or decades of research. What we are learning from NIAX, it related to our tree sale, is that a lot of our species that are currently here are probably not going to be well suited here in 30 years. For example, our balsam fir. We likely will not have balsam fir forests here 40 or 50 years from today. Will some of those trees still exist on the landscape? Probably in little micro habitats, low-lying pockets, along lake shores, but we're not going to have the vast stands that you see when you drive our countryside. So we're looking at other types of species that data is showing are going to be much more conducive here, and it's not needle-bearing trees. It's more of hardwood types of species. So that's why we provide that education to landowners today, so that when these trees reach maturity 20, 30 years from now, if we're losing some of our northern forests at that time, hopefully we're putting something else on the landscape that's has a strong ability to survive.
Black walnut, right?
Black walnut, American cherry, there's a whole list of species, red maples.
George?
It's kind of a forestry committee's domain, but it strikes me that that might have implications for harvesting decisions.
Absolutely. Our forestry department, if we want to be timber harvesting, I hope that they're looking at this. Because if we wait 20 years from now, it's going to be too late. We should be planting these species today.
Anybody else? Moving on. Agency, NRCS and staff reports.
NRCS, Michael was not able to make it today. So we're going to move on to staff reports.
Have my staff report there. There is probably less cost share projects listed at this time of year than you would expect, but that's kind of back to must have been February when our first meeting was this year, when kind of let you all know that our DACAP engineer had moved on to a different position, and that position is still vacant. I just talked to a different environmental specialist from DACAP last week in a meeting. So I've been bouncing back and forth between 2 to 3 different people at DACAP or county levels trying to get projects designed and signed off on. So that's why there's only 2 listed there with signed cost share agreements. But there are other projects still going to happen. Hoping to have one more project sent off this week for final review. And once those contracts are signed, we'll be able to put some conservation on the ground. Other than that, I will keep it brief. So are there any questions?
Pat?
That was Stacy Daney, and she was with DACAP for about 22, 23 years.
Anybody else?
Okay. In the middle of my conservationist report, I have some updates on grants. Figure you guys care about the money, so I'll focus on some grant updates. We currently have a grant this year to update our farmland preservation plan. So Pat, Charlie, and Jim have been sitting on that committee, and we've met 3 or 4 times already. We meet monthly. It's going to take through the rest of this year. That's a 10-year plan, and that is part of our county comprehensive plan. They are nestled into each other in the same publication. So I received a grant through DACAP to hire the Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and that pays for about half of the Planning Commission's consulting fee. We're also administering our National Association of Conservation Districts grant. That's about a $100,000 grant, and that pays for our ag tech position. Now, with the vacancy that we've had for the last 6 or 7 weeks, and I know that our IT person is backed up on computer work, so we're probably not going to be able to hire for a couple more weeks yet to be able to get a computer set up. So that's going to give us about 2 months of salary savings. So that will extend that grant pretty far into next year, actually. And then we also administer our annual DACAP grant, which pays for staffing and all the conservation projects that Seth works on. That is a little over 200,000 for those two things. In addition, Ellie's working on a Great Lakes restoration. She's being funded through a Great Lakes restoration grant that we had some remaining funds left over from a couple years ago. So we have that in our budget for this year. We also submitted a new Great Lakes restoration grant to begin another flood management project that will begin at the end of this year. I've mentioned this in my last staff report, but the final amount that we applied for is just shy of 300,000. We also applied for a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grant a couple weeks ago to replace some road culverts in the town of Marengo and town of Morse. This was not on my radar. These culverts are adjacent to National Forest lands, and they're in the towns. So the town of Morse reached out to me and asked for financial assistance. And then I found out from the U.S. Forest Service about the opportunity for this grant. So we have quite a few partners involved. U.S. Forest Service is designing the culverts. The towns are involved in helping to get them implemented. The Highway Department is actually going to be doing the construction installation, and the U.S. Forest Service will pay for that. So right now it is tied up in the challenges with the federal budgets. So if that money is released, we will have a little over 400,000 to begin working on those 4 culvert replacements. And I anticipate those would go in next year. I also last week just submitted another grant to our Headwaters to Coast group, which is through our local U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And this would be to try and complete the Berwiger Road project. That was originally going to be part of our Act 157 flood work a few years ago. Mike Perro, Stacy Daney, and Seth, when Seth came on board, had worked on the design to replace the culverts at Berwiger Road and work with Brian Anderson on some stream restoration to stop erosion going through his farm fields. We were never able to get our FEMA flood permit for that site. So I've applied for a $400,000 grant to hire a hydraulic engineer that would help us get through all of the FEMA permitting and try to restore that site, which continues to be a problem for Brian Anderson. So that's an update on some of the current and new grants. Last week, we hosted our first annual all-county employee cookout. So we started a wellness group in the county this year. We've never had a wellness program. So I started that up. I have a small committee that is helping me work on that, and we coordinate events quarterly right now. Hopefully we'll be expanding it more into the future to have all sorts of different types of activity, challenge activities, games, maybe a book club. But right now we're focusing on potlucks and meals together, basically trying to build camaraderie, get to know each other more, try and help build retention throughout the county. But last week we had the event at Prentice Park. It was the first time the county has ever done this, and we had 100 people attend. The Highway Department did all the grilling, and everybody brought a dish to pass, and it was a pretty nice event. And I think that's about it for me. There's been lots of other workshops. We continue to be interviewed about our flood management work. So we've had a couple stories come out in the Milwaukee Journal. There was also a natural flood group out of Chicago that contacted me. So there continues to be some outreach related to that. And that's about it. So I'm doing lots of work with comprehensive planning right now. So the county comprehensive plan, our farmland preservation plan, and then the town of Marengo. So these typically have monthly meetings and lots of input associated with each of them. That's it for me.
Alrighty, so I believe you have my land and water specialist report in front of you. As always, feel free to ask questions along the way. Just a few highlights that I'd like to point out. Over the past, I would say 2 months or so, we've really ramped up environmental education. I know Ellie's going to talk about that quite a bit, so I certainly don't want to steal her thunder, but we've hosted a lot of presentations and trainings and plantings and all kinds of really, really good local school projects. So I'll let her kind of take the lead on telling you more about those. We also attended Kids Fishing Day at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center. Always a great educational outreach event to get out to. We always like to take a very hands-on approach. We always like to go out and collect live invasive species and then bring them to the actual Kids Fishing Day, so they're seeing them firsthand. They can see exactly what they look like, and they're not reading about it via a brochure or seeing pictures of it. It's actually the actual specimen, and again, should really emphasize that hands-on learning. So we talked to about like 350, 400 people or so just in that one event. So that was overall another great Kids Fishing Day there. We are just kind of kicking off our AIS monitoring season. So you have our lake list is listed there. So we'll do a bare minimum of monitoring 8 lakes this year for invasive species, and that'll be just on the inland side of things. We also have about 15 sites, high traffic, high use sites on Lake Superior, and we'll definitely monitor those as well. So you see those sites listed there. Kind of as the years go on, we're getting more and more involvement from folks that live on inland lakes in Ashland County, which is just awesome to see. I love seeing that lake resident involvement there. So we're getting a lot more phone calls and emails, texts, pictures, that kind of stuff of people wanting us to identify, those mystery plants or mystery species that they're seeing at their lake. Absolutely love getting those calls and emails and pictures. It's really nice. They're, kind of the eyes and ears of their lake. So for them to get engaged with the water body that they happen to live on, or just, something that maybe they see at a park, and then connect that to our department. I think that's really, really awesome. And we always do our absolute best to do site visits and kind of follow up with them and answer any questions that they might have about that. Let's see. We've been also doing a lot of invasive species control. So we just kind of wrapped up our garlic mustard season there. We did big hand pulling events along the Bad River near Mellon, right outside of Copper Falls State Park. And then we had another one with Ashland High School and our local weed co-op along Bay City Creek. And then we've also been doing a fair amount of control on Loon Lake at Copper Falls State Park, mostly for yellow iris, and then also we did find some blue strife as well. So doing a lot of hand removal for those invasives as well. Let's see. Yeah, then I guess the last thing that kind of ties in, climate change and kind of what we're seeing, out in the field and especially on the water. We're getting more and more calls and concern about cyanobacteria or blue-green algae blooms within our inland lakes, which is something that even over the last, let's say, 5 years, it's really ramped up, which is a little bit concerning. You see a lot of these water levels are quite a bit lower than what they have been in the past. And water temperature seems to be even, kind of early in the growing season, even in April, May, June. Those water temperatures are quite a bit higher than, historically what they would have been, which is a little concerning and definitely, opens up the door for these blue-green algae blooms to really take off. So we've received a fair amount of calls already, and so we'll be doing quite a few site visits to look at the blue-green algae that that we've found in previous years, and then again address any of those issues from lake resident or property owners, and check out whatever issues they might have. So that's kind of the big thing here. And then again, Ellie will take it away with our educational outreach efforts. Yeah, so Mary Jo brought up a great point. So I'm also working with Health and Human Services with Ashland County. So again, with this blue-green algae and cyanobacteria blooms, it can be really, really harmful to both humans and also pets as well. So dogs, and then also I would say small children as well. Probably dogs are the most susceptible to go play fetch or drink water along a lot of these inland lakes. And if they take too much of the cyanobacteria, it can lead to definitely severe illness or even death. So I'm working very, very closely whenever we do find these big blooms, working closely with Liz and making sure that we're educating the public. So we've been using Facebook quite a bit and news releases and sharing it with stakeholder groups. And then one thing that we ordered last year, the state of Wisconsin does make like a public health blue-green algae sign. So Ellie and myself will be hanging those at the lakes that we did find the highest blue-green algae concentrations at this last summer and last fall. Again, just to warn the public that this is a real thing, it's going on, it's present in these waters, and to kind of plan accordingly. So probably not a good idea to be swimming, at least not directly within the bloom, and then be very, very cautious if you decide to let pets swim and play within the water as well. So those signs will go up very soon, actually, probably within the next week or two. Yeah.
George?
So Scott, the county has a degree of responsibility at 2 boat launch sites on Chequamegon Bay. That'd be Tomcheck Park and Second Landing. Are those monitored? And if so, what have been your observations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess kind of the easy answer, fortunately, Lake Superior isn't seeing nearly as much blue-green algae blooms. We do monitor it for invasive species, and we're, obviously always keeping our eyes open for blue-green algae. Fortunately, we haven't had too much trouble with blue-green algae in particular. I know there have been, a lot of like E. coli and coliform bacteria issues at Maslowski Beach and by Crayer and a lot of our local beaches there. Is it Northland that takes the lead on that monitoring? Yeah, so Northland College does more like the water quality side of things there. And then, yeah, I'm not sure who is going to be picking that up moving forward. Bayfield County.
Yeah, Bayfield County purchased all the equipment.
Okay, excellent.
Just a curiosity question, whether the low water levels in Lake Superior are having any kind of impact?
Yeah, that's a great question too. There have been some blooms like over by like the Apostle Islands, Bayfield, kind of Washburn neck of the woods. We're not really seeing it on the Ashland side. With the low water levels, it's definitely a lot more likely that we're going to start seeing that kind of stuff. So definitely keeping an eye out for it, and we're definitely, like I said, we're definitely seeing it on our inland waters. And I would like to say it's not going to happen within Chequamegon Bay or Lake Superior, but it definitely is a lot more likely. I'll put it that way.
Going into my staff report, so this spring has been really exciting to start and increase our youth conservation education program, like Scott was saying. So we had the opportunity to get into quite a few schools. We did a tree planting with Butternut. We had 5th graders with the leftover trees from our tree and shrub sale. So we were able to do an educational tree planting with them. We did a big nature scavenger hunt with K through 5th grades at Marengo Valley. They got to observe different tables with animal furs, skulls, different remnants that they may leave behind, and the kids were able to feel, touch, observe, and kind of get really excited about just being outdoors and learning about the different things in nature and get them excited at a young age. Then we went to Ashland Middle School for a couple different presentations. We were able to do an introduction to land, water, and invasive species for 8th grade science classes. And then Scott and I were asked to participate in their Future Friday. So different agencies. So we were there. There was people talking about electricians, other people having different Fridays come in. So it was really excited to be able to talk conservation to them and kind of show them our path and how each path is different to get into their different ways in life they're going to be at. Scott also mentioned we attended Kids Fishing Day and talked to quite a few students or kids there. It was really exciting to see them get up close and personal to our live species. And then lastly, for educational outreach, I've been doing a creature feature on Facebook. So it's a little update on, what's a new, not necessarily a new invasive species, but a feature of a different invasive species pretty much every week that people can have. It has identifying features, control, and some little facts about them. So it's a little thing that anyone on Facebook can see and learn about. And then for the conservation technician side, assisting in the garlic mustard polls and the yellow iris polls in our lake monitoring. And then starting the Clean Boats, Clean Waters. So I do Clean Boats, Clean Waters at that Crayer and Second Landing. So getting the word out to boaters about keeping their boats clean so that they're not transferring them from Lake Superior to our inland lakes, but also vice versa. So there's been 2 big weekends so far, the Drain Campaign and AIS Awareness Weekend. And then coming up will be Landing Blitz around the 4th of July. Other than that, it's pretty much assisting Seth on some water sampling and other things through the Watershed Project Coordinator, but more of that will come, like Mary Jo said, in the fall.
Good.
Pat.
So the invasive species things, Mary Jo, couple thoughts and questions, and this is more future agenda stuff. You know, I've brought up buckthorn before, and when we talk about invasive species, we talk about other things other than buckthorn because buckthorn is rather overwhelming. But as I drive out on San Bernardino Avenue to the farm back and forth, you know, especially spring and fall where that buckthorn is really obvious because of the dark green leaves, it's really astounding how this is spreading. So perhaps we could talk to the highway commissioner and ask, would the state, if we made the case, fund doing more brushing of the ditches where buckthorn is spreading? Because clearly the buckthorn has a negative effect on our environment up here, our woods. You know, we could make that case and, you know, this committee, your department, you know, could give Matt something to work with on the importance of mitigating that buckthorn spread. And then I think of when they do brushing along the power line. So I've got a mile of road frontage, and the last time they brushed there, they asked, could we spray the brush that's growing, you know, say along the fields, because they, you know, just quicker for them. And so I reluctantly said yes. And I wish I would have said no now because they sprayed the brush that was very effective at killing it, but then it was left. And so then it falls into the field and I'm cleaning that out, or it falls into the ditch in the town when they mow, it's hitting it. So I thought, well, that's not so good. So my thought here is if the highway department could get funded by the state to do that mowing, to knock down the buckthorn where we have buckthorn in the right of way. And then if we could coordinate that with the company doing the brushing and control for the power lines, you know, let's say where the power line goes through a woods and they've got to get their brush. They obviously, I mean, they drive a truck and they can, from the road, spray and zap the brush. If they could then, after the county mows the brush, the buckthorn, come in and spray that, that works for them too, because then they're not actually having to do the brushing. All they've got to do is, yep, we can spray the stumps and hopefully kill most, if not all of that buckthorn. So they're going to do that sooner or later anyway. If the state pays for the brushing, that's good for us. It mitigates the spread of buckthorn. So maybe those pieces could come together, in that way that's good and doesn't add to our funding demand.
So are you just asking me to ask Matt if they can get paid by the state to brush the ditches to remove buckthorn? And ask Matt if he can coordinate with the power line companies?
Well, let's start with asking Matt if he needs some help on justifying this to the state, that we then give him a justification for why buckthorn control is important up here. So adding to his mowing of the ditches using a brush hog probably, or a skid steer, with a mower on front. If he can get funding to do that, that helps with buckthorn control, but obviously it's not going to kill the buckthorn, but at least it would keep plants from going to seed more than they are right now. And the next step would be to see who's contracted with maintaining those power lines. I know out by Mason at Zelli's, which Northern Clearing owns, they do most of that brushing up here. So we could then contact most likely Northern Clearing and then see if we could coordinate that after the county brushes through state funds, that they could then spray this, and that would seem to be good for them too, as far as managing those lines. And then the highway department is going to add another position, and so they should be happy to find some extra work to keep everybody busy. So that probably works out for the highway department too, I would assume. Right?
Dan, do you have any comments on this? Or I'm wondering, is this something that should go to the forest or the highway committee? I mean, I can ask Matt, but Matt might just say, sorry, we're too busy.
Well, it's also a matter of where the buckthorn is. If it's not in the state right of way, the state's not going to pay for it. If it's in the state right of way, they're taking down everything. So whether it's poplar tree or buckthorn, they're taking it all to clear it when they brush. They also do the same thing with county roads. If it's in the county right of way, then they'll take it down.
Are the ditches fully in the right of way?
Each road is different.
Hmm.
I think it's the state roads are 26 feet, I think, from the center line.
Or 30. I think it's 60-foot corridor, 30
Yeah.
feet on center.
Well, two rods would be 33 feet.
Right.
So they should be, I mean, even the town roads are typically what they call 4-rod roads, so 33 feet from the center. So like Sanborn Avenue has got to be at least a 4-rod road. So they should be able to get the buckthorn. They said the buckthorn doesn't get so tall, it doesn't get into the power lines. So it kind of gets left and it spreads. And,
Right. Right. And the power companies will take down anything that interferes with the power lines.
but it won't interfere with the power line because it's not going to get that tall, so it gets left. And that's where I think Matt would have to ask the state, can we brush this buckthorn? Because there's good reasons to remove this buckthorn, environmentally.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is that my role is to ask him to take on more work? I mean, I guess I'm not understanding why this wouldn't just go to highway
Right.
as like a public comment or an agenda item to discuss it.
Right.
Like coming from me, it doesn't seem like I don't know.
I don't know, maybe you should talk to Bill Metzinger about it. And he can put it on the agenda.
For highway?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, vice versa, if Matt came to me and told me, I want you to start doing this, I'm going to look to see, like, does this fit into my work plan? I don't know. I mean, brushing ditches sounds like a lot of work to me. So I don't know if that's just something easy that they can do more regularly, or if they can do more brushing of ditches.
Well, no, they do it all the time. And no, they do it all the time because you need to brush the sides of the roads so there's better visibility. I mean, that's why the DOT pays for it. But like I said, I would talk to Bill Metzinger, who's chair of the highway committee, and get an agenda item for it.
So then, Pat, where the buckthorn is, How come it's not being currently cut if it's in the ditch?
It's not being cut. My take on it would be, you know, you look at Sanborn Avenue from the hill going south. It's literally in the last 3, 4, 5 years, there's so much more in the next mile or more going down there. It's not tall enough to get into the power lines. So if it's Zellies that do the maintenance of the power lines, it's not an issue for them anytime soon because, you know, it's along a field and there's buckthorn, but it's spreading. So they don't see it as an issue. And then highway does whatever brushing they do. But, you know, if they've got places where there's things, you know, like poplar trees growing, you know, that sort of stuff, they're going to make that a priority, you know, versus something like this. So it hasn't been brushed on Sanborn Avenue in a long time. So, you know, they might mow there, but this stuff is still, I would assume, in the right of way from looking at where it is. But it doesn't bother anybody as far as the function of the road, the snow plowing, the mowing the side of the road. But yet buckthorn and honeysuckle too, they really like these open spaces like fence lines to keep spreading. And you go south of town, where the guy that has a refrigeration business by the tavern there, Malls, I think, he's got a wetland there. And if you, George, you go by there all the time too. In the last 3, 4 years, the buckthorn that is growing up around that wetland restoration is amazing. I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, I'm thinking I could get out there with the chainsaw and some Roundup and in 3, 4 hours control this. And now I look at the buckthorn, this stuff grows like weeds. It's just amazing how much there is. So we're going to lose wetland restorations too, because they're overwhelmed with buckthorn. So I'm just looking for a place to start to see if the state would pay for more brushing, coordinate it with Zellies if they do it. And
So one thing to keep in mind with buckthorn is if you simply cut it and it's exposed to the sun, it encourages it to grow back thicker and faster. So on my property, I have buckthorn starting now. Some of them are tree sized. We've been cutting it with a chainsaw and then we paint it with herbicide and we're covering these with coffee cans. So if we go and brush along the highways and we're just strictly cutting it and there's no other treatment, I'm not certain we're actually doing ourselves a favor because it could be causing it to grow back more prolifically.
well, that's where, if highway can get funded by the state to do it, then we talk to if it's Zellies that do the brushing and they've got this truck and they just go down the road and, okay, they've brushed buckthorn here. They can then spray it with an herbicide to kill the buckthorn. We'd have to get both steps, but before we talk to Zellies, if they're doing it, we would see if highway can get paid to, by the state to do that brushing. And if the state needs a justification, then we would provide the justification, and that would be all that would come from Land and Water, was just helping Matt to understand the importance of this. So he can justify to the state doing more brushing than he is otherwise doing. But if we don't get Zellies or whoever does it involved, yes, I agree, it's not going to accomplish what we were hoping.
Pat.
Yeah, I got one more. Sorry, Mary Jo. I don't know if they're going to do line 5 or not, or when. So I did one wetland restoration of the farm 3 years ago. I'm hoping to do more. And moving dirt is expensive. You know, they prefer to push it with the dozer than load it up on trucks and stuff. So I think about line 5, if they really do that project, no matter what a person thinks of it, they're moving a lot of dirt and it crosses areas where there's water, et cetera. I can't help but think that there's probably some opportunities where, as long as they're there anyway with big equipment and moving dirt, if potentially we put together some basic information to the landowners and said, hey, if this goes through, here are some things that potentially could add some benefits to your property in terms of natural resource concerns. Maybe there's a place where they can leave some material that creates a little wetland to slow the water somewhere, add to wildlife. Or maybe it's somewhere it's flattened out, but maybe they create a sedge meadow. Just something so landowners, if they wanted to work with whoever does line 5 and they realize with all that dirt being moved, instead of putting it back exactly where it was, maybe something slightly different in some places it may not take much, they could then contact whoever's going to do the Line 5 stuff and say, hey, and maybe we just give them some information that says, the following things, if you want to hold a little bit of water, given the slope of your land, you could do that. Here's some potential benefits to things to consider. So it's just information that could get passed on and let landowners decide if they want to contact whoever's doing it, so that whatever negative effects there are from burying a line and crossing all these water bodies, maybe some landowners might see this as an opportunity and work with whoever does Line 5, and a foot of difference of elevation here and there might have some positive impacts as far as what it looks like when it's done. So.
Yeah, I have no idea if Line 5 engineers or contractors would be open to that. The only thing that I'm familiar with so far is that farmers that we have that were in farmland preservation, that are in the path of the proposed pipeline, they did have to take their land out of farmland preservation because the pipeline is not a land use that's conducive with farmland preservation. So the landowners were instructed to remove their lands from farmland preservation for the path in the easement where the pipe is proposed. And then the pipeline would be put in, and the landowners would not have access to that during all of the construction. And once Enbridge was done with the construction, 100% done with construction, then the landowners would be able to re-enter their land back into farmland preservation and reestablish their agriculture land use. So what I'm not aware of is, will Enbridge work directly with the landowner to implement some sort of conservation? They're on a mission to get their project done, and I'm not sure how much leniency they have to work with individual landowners to implement additional types of things beyond their plan for the pipe.
George?
Just for reference, a quick estimate calculation of the amount of rock and soil to be displaced simply by the pipe itself, assuming maybe a 30-inch pipe, about 40,000 cubic yards of material. Of course, it's spread over 40 miles, but I say the project would probably displace, just by the volume of the pipe itself, which has to displace rock and soil. That's probably about 40,000 cubic yards of material.
So to put that in perspective, that is 3,076 dump trucks.
Dan?
So just as an update, the president at the beginning of his term declared the pipeline as a national energy emergency and ordered the Army Corps to issue the permit as soon as possible. So there have been hearings going on, local hearings going on. I'd expect that permit to be issued sometime this summer and construction as soon as this summer. So it's coming fast.
One final thought on, highway right-of-ways. The past couple winters, the county crew has been a little more aggressive in the southern part of the county on brushing, much needed brushing, and I'm talking trees and such. And even though the state has the right-of-way so many feet out, you're gonna have to deal with, you're talking about spraying, you're gonna have to deal with landowners. They may or may not agree to that because the highway department is going through a little issue right now with a landowner who claimed trees, filed a permit or application, I guess you could call it, the permit, and there was one little item wrong on it, so he didn't get it, but yet he's still causing trouble with, wanting either the trees or reimbursement, and it's probably still ongoing. I don't know if Dan can comment on that, but, gotta watch as far as, highway right-of-ways and boundaries, be very careful on.
Yeah, I haven't heard from that guy in a couple months now. I think he's back down at this point.
Okay. Then we'll move on to report updates. Any? Hearing none. Schedule a meeting date. The next meeting date.
Probably around budget time, right, Dan?
Yeah, I would do it in August.
When is the budget due to the county?
Operations budget is due August 1st. Finance committee will start looking at it, parts of the budget at least in August. Yeah, and they'll probably approve the easy ones right away. And then September will be the harder ones. Am I right, Mr. Kinney?
Easy stuff gets approved, quickly, and then things that are farther to the resolution are the ones that take longer to end up with wherever we end up.
And everything is still up in the air because the state doesn't release shared revenue numbers until the middle of September. So we'll know what equalized value is in August, but we won't know the actual shared revenue until September.
But you should know the healthcare numbers this year.
Does that work now? We know the healthcare is going up 11%, but our surcharge is going down. It's going down from 30% to 15%. So there should be a slight net savings on healthcare. And I did send out an email with numbers for everyone that will be close enough for budgeting purposes.
So I guess the question for you guys is, do you want to see the budget before I submit it on August 1st? And I am going to be presenting at a conference that week in Milwaukee, so we wouldn't be able to meet the last week of July. Or we can meet in August after I've already submitted the budget.
Charlie?
I say Mary Jo is going to be super busy trying to prepare that budget in the next month to saddle her with a meeting as well to give it to us. So I suggest August at when you are a bowling ball less or two.
George?
I concur. I think August is a good timing.
Pat?
Yeah, August is fine with me, both from being on this committee and finance, because if there is anything we want to kick back to this committee, then you'll know what it is, and we'll just go through the process to clarify anything that's where there's questions or discussion.
Very good.
Okay, how about we meet in 2 months on August 28th,
What date or day of the week is that?
Thursday?
9 o'clock here?
Yes.
That's okay with me.
All right, tentatively, we'll do that. If we need to change it, we can change it.
Good for you. Oh, I'll help you pick. Like 3 years?
Perfect, bring some in. Bring 2 ears.
All right, then, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Do I hear a second? Second by Jerry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.